Hello class. The purpose of this video is to help you get through the week 1 assignment on using the Microsoft threat modeling tool. And after you watch this, if you have any questions, feel free to ask, but I also encourage you to look at the practical application of threat modeling document that is included in the assignment student materials. So first of all, keep your diagram simple. The diagram we're going to look at here as I build it is very simple, and there isn't enough time in this class to create a complex diagram and to assess it. The other thing I want you to keep in mind is that this threat modeling tool is not used by security professionals typically. It's intended to be used by developers. Now, this doesn't mean that it's not valuable to security people. In the new world of DevOps, developers work closely with security and operations people, and this tool can help everyone sit around a table to determine what the risk is in the attack surfaces with the different software. In week 2, however, we're going to go through how to translate something like this into a network diagram and then into an attack tree. It's important you only use the icons provided by the tool because these have specific attributes assigned to them, and then when the tool determines what the vulnerabilities are or potential vulnerabilities are, it uses those attributes. So don't just draw circles and things on the screen, because that won't get you the results you need for the assignment. And again, you're going to be setting attributes. I'll show you how to do that. But you need to set attributes on the icons that you use. And the reason that we're going to set these attributes in certain ways is because if you don't set them at all, you're going to get a huge vulnerability report at the end. We don't want a huge one. We want one that's just big enough so you can get an idea of how it works and so that you have some information to help you in the following assignments. So what's a data flow diagram? Data flow diagram is very important. It shows the flow of information between components in a system. What it does not show, however, are network components like switches, firewalls, IPS, etc. It only shows the software component. So it'll show a web application, it'll show a browser, it'll show a SQL database, but it won't, and it'll show that there's data flowing and what kind of connectivity there is and what data might be flowing along those connections, but it will not provide enough information for us to do a layered security model. It's useful for developers to set authentication and ensure trust between components. It's also useful for security professionals so that we understand what components are involved. We also have to understand what hardware those reside on, what network segments they reside on, and we can work with operations, network operations, to get that information. DFDs are data flow diagrams. DFEs do not replace attack trees. And again, we're going to look at attack trees in week 2. For a detailed discussion, and it's not a big document, it's like 8 pages. For a detailed discussion how we apply these concepts, see practical application of threat modeling in student materials for this activity. This will give you a good idea of how we get from a data flow diagram to a network diagram to an attack tree. And I will be using, in week 2, I'll have an additional video which will take the data flow diagram that we're creating this week, creating a network diagram, and then creating an attack tree so you can see how that process works. And then I would recommend you do that in week 2 so that for the rest of the assignments, you're actually using the data flow diagram and the attack tree to come up with a set of vulnerabilities for your network. So when you download the threat modeling tool and load it, this is what you should see. This is the 2016 version. Make sure you're using that one. Now, if you're using a Mac, and you have no access to Windows, you can stop right here because this tool only works in Windows. If you are using a Mac, then let me know, call me, send me a private message, and I will give you a workaround for this problem. So what we're going to do is we're going to leave template for new models alone, and we're going to click on create a model. And what we see here is a blank screen that with a grid that will be creating our data flow diagram. That's on the left. And on the right, we have stencils. All of the icons, anything that appears on the left, connections, applications, whatever, needs to be drug from the stencils. You drag that onto the left-hand side. Again, by doing that, you're providing the threat management tool with the information it needs to start creating vulnerability reports. And what you can see here is I dragged 4 elements of 4 stencils over to the left-hand side. I got a human user, a web browser, a web application, and a SQL database. So one of the things that you're going to want to do as soon as you do this, even before you put in connections, is you're going to want to assign attributes to the icons or the stencils that you moved over. So in this particular example, I have clicked on customer order entry. That was in our previous slide. That was our web application. And what I've done here is I have actually changed the name in the attributes slide or attributes area. You can't see it because it's up above the area that's actually shown, but it's right at the top and it's easy to see. I simply typed in customer order entry to replace web application. Each attribute is set using a dropbox, and the following slides are going to show how I set those attributes. What this does, again, as I mentioned when we first started, this provides us with a set of vulnerabilities, not too many, but plenty to get your next assignments done and to give you an idea of how this tool should work. Now you can use these attributes and this diagram if you like. I am not going to force you to try to make up something or try to make something complex from another that's not going to be able to be fit into the timeline for this class. However, you are supposed to select a specific organization, so I would recommend that you come up with a web application that is used by your selected organization, and you just assign it some similar attributes, even if you don't know what the attributes are that are already assigned. If you do, then assign those attributes and you should be good to go. So I'm going to bring up the slides and show you the attributes I assigned to these stencils, and then I will pause on those for a few seconds. You can pause the slide presentation if you like. I'm also provided the slides for this presentation in the student materials. So once you assign the attributes to your stencils, then you have to put in some connections. The connections that I'm using are under generic data flow under stencils. And as you can see, I dragged and dropped IPsec over to be the connection between customer order entry application and the SQL database. I'm not going to set any attributes for this. I'm not going to add any custom attributes. I'm just going to leave it alone. The tool knows how IPsec works, so I don't have to try to modify that in any way. And note that I have to drag it over twice so that I can get a data flow in each direction. One direction is from the order entry system and order entry app, and the other one is from the SQL database to the order entry app. Here, you can also see that I set up an HTTP connection between the user's browser and the customer order entry web application. I used HTTP instead of HTTPS because it provides some vulnerabilities that are easy to remedy when you're doing your other assignments. Also here, you'll see that we have trust boundaries. A trust boundary is a point at which security changes. The information assurance changes. So in this particular case, we have a SQL database which likely is on, hopefully, is on a lockdown VLAN. It's a lockdown server, and it is exchanging data with a web server running a web application. So web servers and web applications are usually not on highly locked down network segments. They can't be. In this particular case, since we have our user out on the internet, and you can see that because we have an internet boundary, it's probably sitting in a DMZ. Now, the DMZ is relatively secure, but it's not as secure as locking down a SQL database inside of a VLAN with VLAN access control lists that are very strong. So you can drag these elements over and put them in so that this also helps the management tool or the threat modeling tool to provide some potential vulnerabilities because these trust boundaries exist. There are always trust boundaries when you're creating a system. Make sure you clearly identify them when you're doing your risk assessments, and make sure you are properly protecting information as it crosses those trust boundaries. If you notice, I did not put any connections between the human user and the browser. We're going to leave that for when we address our network diagrams and our attack trees. Now, when you submit your assignment, you're supposed to submit a document that is describing certain objectives, and you're supposed to submit a report. The report is an HTML file that is generated by clicking on Reports at the top of the Threat Modeling app and selecting Create Full Report. Save it. It saves it as a single HTML document. You upload that along with your Word document. This report is very important. You need to look through it, get an idea of how it works. What it's showing you in this report are potential vulnerabilities that you need to address. A DevOps team might look at this report and say, okay, we have vulnerability A, but it is mitigated by control B, so we don't really need to do anything with it, and we would make that notation. On the other hand, the vulnerability that's listed might not exist. It's just something that the threat modeling tool is telling you might, and you need to check. If it's not there, great. If it is there, and you don't have a compensating control, then you need to address that vulnerability by eliminating it or implementing a compensating control. Well, that's it. It's not a long video, but I think it contains everything you need to complete the week 1 assignment. I don't want you to spend a lot of time on this. Again, keep it simple. If you want to copy what I did and modify it based on the specific organization you chose, feel free. I do not want you to create some complex diagrams that are going to create 20 to 30 pages of vulnerabilities. That's not the purpose of these assignments. The purpose of these assignments is to understand how this tool works, how it can be integrated into an overall risk assessment, which we will discuss next week. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask.